So this is what we're making, a series of fold-form leaves soldered together. So you can have them with the stems on the inside, like this one, or with the stems on the outside, like this one. So it's just an idea. Use your imagination and run with it. To make this bracelet, what I'm going to do is cut my little leaf shapes out of paper, and I think I'm going to try to make it for 5 leaves, so they're going to be fairly small. I reckon about 60 mil long. So I've got an old calendar that I tore the leaves off, and what I'm going to do is just a small stem, and then my standard gum leaf shape. You can make this any shape you want, but the stem doesn't have to be a bale for this, so it can be fairly short, but it will be soldered. And these leaves will be, I think, 0.6 or 0.7 thick sterling. So I've got a few leaves, and what I do is I use my bench plate as my measuring device, because most cuff bracelets are about 150 mil long, which is what this is. So what I'm going to do is lay these shapes out to just get the idea. And what I want is overlapping slightly back and forth. And I want the leaves to go roughly in the same direction. So this will give me an idea of my shape and how many I need. So this looks pretty good. And I don't want them just straight on top of each other. I want them slightly wonky, because leaves are seldom straight on the ground. So this is the idea. I'm going to tidy up the shape of this leaf, but I'm pretty happy with that as an idea. Okay, this is the shape I ended up with. It's 20 millimeters wide by 40 millimeters long with a 20 millimeter long stem. So a total of 60 mil by 20, 0.7 thick, I think is what we'll use. So we need 5 of these. It can be any shape you want. It's just that for me, something that's about 20 mil wide is good for a cuff bracelet. So with the material I had, these ended up being 50 by 20. So we'll anneal, put a mark down the middle, bend it, and fold it. With the annealed metal, I haven't pickled it because I want the oxides on so that I can see. So I'm going to set my digital calipers at roughly 10, because these are 20 wide. Doesn't have to be perfect. Lock it so it doesn't move. Drag the back down. You hook one edge over and drag the back. So you have this mark. Now, I've got these industrial looking pliers. And I've got these confirming pliers from Rio, which I normally use for this, they're quite good. But they're fairly expensive. And these are from Super Cheap Auto, and they cost me $12. And they're welding pliers, but you can see that they're going to work just fine for the same thing, because we just want our bend so that it is around 90 degrees. We'll hammer it flat with the rawhide hammer, and then we'll texture it. But you can see for a $12 set of pliers, these are really handy, and this is 100 mil long, so you can use it for longer bits. I actually found those online on eBay, but yeah, super cheap auto, $10 or $12. So bend all of your pieces and hammer them flat and texture them. I'm just going to hold this sideways and gently tap the edges so that they meet each other as close to perfect as you can get. Hammer it flat with your rawhide, and then I'm using a little French jeweler's hammer, but it's the cross-peen part that I'm using. So first off, I just flatten it the rest of the way, and then put my marks on. Flip it over, do the other side, make sure the marks go in the same direction. Now, when we cut our leaf, the stem will be here because we want the marks to angle down. So when you draw your leaf, make sure that the stem is on the folded part. Otherwise, you'll end up with two pieces. Now, I'm only making about a 15 mil long stem. Slightly rounded and then down to a fairly long taper. Just a typical gum leaf. And I'm right-handed, so I'll have the marks on the right-hand side, so it's easy to cut. If you were left-handed, you'd have your marks on the left-hand side, so it's easier to cut that way. So do all 5 of these and cut it out before you anneal it, because it's easier to cut when it's work hardened. For the stem, you only need 1.5 or 2 mil wide at the most, and we're going to solder that closed before we open the leaf. So take your time sawing it out. Do a really good job. As you get to the end of your cut, make sure your fingers aren't in front of the blade. And at this point, file it with your number 2 cut flat hand file to get rid of the saw marks. Make sure that this stem is hammered completely closed because we're going to solder it now. So file it, sand it, and we'll solder this, anneal it, and open it. So you can see I have this held in my third hand. And mix your flux. And just put a line of flux right on the stem where you're soldering. And I'm going to use hard solder because I use hard solder for almost everything. And just one 3 millimeter long piece. So I'm using number 7 tip on my mini torch. Heat your solder pick, lower it, touch the solder, pick it up, Now this is a tungsten soldering pick, so it works for picking up solder quite easily. So heat the stem. When the flux goes clear, lower your solder down, and I'm going to touch it right on the very end so that when it flows I can watch it and stop before I get to the folded part of the leaf. Yep. So now, while we're here, we'll just drop it down onto the charcoal block and anneal it. We just bring it up to a dull red. Which is there, you can see. And I'm going to let it air cool because I don't want water inside the fold. So once they've cooled enough that you can handle them, start to open this with a straight burnisher and push against something other than your fingers. So this is all we need. And then I'm going to use the rawhide and hammer it over my square forming mandrel, so that'll just open it right up.